Hi, I am Brittany, and today I'm talking to Joe, who is a livestock expert at Yukon. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and what role you play at Yukon Extension?
Sure. Joe Emenheiser. I'm the livestock specialist with Yukon Extension. So I work with producers, processors, all sorts of species that focus on meat livestock, but emphasis on economic development for livestock in the state and meat quality improvement. Kind of my two main strike zones, but I answer a lot of different stuff.
Cool. So we've been speaking with farmers about the role of DIY in their operations and how that ties into humane handling. Can you tell us what exactly humane handling means?
Well, I mean, in a narrow sense, handling livestock is you could think of it as physically touching them, and maybe it's to get them to point A to point B, maybe it's to complete some sort of health procedure. I probably think of it more broadly, and we domesticated these livestock 10,000 years ago or whatever it was, and we created a new environment for them, and we provide for them, and they provide for us, and it's in theory, it's a symbiotic relationship like that. And so to me, the animal handling is meeting them halfway in that new environment that we've created for them, and providing for their needs, recognizing what they are as a critter, and ultimately designing a system that works for both of us.
Yeah. Something that came up a lot was the transport of animals for processing and the amount of stress that can happen for both the animal and for farmers. What sort of advice do you have for new farmers who are setting up operations and they're trying to figure out best way to transport?
Yeah, it's challenging. I think it's important to recognize that anything that is new for livestock or people, for that matter, is going to cause some amount of stress, and so. Some degree of practice or familiarity with what you're trying to accomplish is going to go a long way. Maybe it's feeding pigs in a trailer prior to closing the door and going down the road, or sheep or grazing livestock that move from pasture to pasture, that get some familiarity with that transport. It doesn't stress them after a certain point. Then there's the basics, like understanding their behavior and making sure that they've got companions, that there's not stress that's being caused by having groups that are mixed inappropriately, ones that are too big or too small, or those sorts of things. Just kind of common sense.
Another big thing, especially for larger livestock, is fencing, and we saw a number of different fencing options, including the electric netting, electric wire, and then the larger cattle fencing. Do you have any important things that farmers should keep in mind when they're deciding what kind of fencing to start using in their operation?
Sure. The biggest one the farmers are going to find out on their own, and really this determines a lot of it, is price. That there's such a range in the cost of these different options, and so even something that might be ideal from a security standpoint or from an aesthetic standpoint or whatever you're evaluating it by, it just might be cost prohibitive. The goal of a fence is to keep animals in and to keep bad things out. And so some degree of security there is important. From a grazing management standpoint, maybe we have a hardwire, permanent perimeter. But within, being able to move animals selectively and make sure that they're not overgrazing a certain area, or we can keep the forages in the right stage of maturity as we're moving it around. That flexibility, I think, is one of the most valuable parts of fencing. One of the best fences for livestock is good feed on the inside, and so if they have grazing opportunities that offer them a choice, allow their nutritional needs to be met, they're less likely to push the fences. They're less likely to try to explore. And in those cases, you can get away with something that might be less expensive or less permanent.
Finding good pasture land is important for farmers and animals alike, especially if the farm isn't large enough to provide adequate pasture. Have you seen any particular innovative ways that farmers have been able to find land for their animals?
With the push toward solar energy and the solar fields or solar arrays, typically that have a fence around them already. Typically the owner of the company is going to be paying a contract for someone to mow it. And in some cases, that land is only available to solar if it's kept in agriculture. So that they're looking for opportunities to graze livestock. And so it's a learning curve all the way around. And sometimes the forages that are established there aren't ideal, and being able to recognize that's important. But I think it's an opportunity that's relatively low cost compared to some of the other options that we've got. But in New England especially, there's a really fierce independence, and it in some ways is what keeps people going. But I think that that if we find ways to collaborate or cooperate with each other, maybe it's finding animals that have acceptable disease status and so forth, so they can be mixed together. But if you can put more animals on a smaller parcel of land for a shorter duration of time and allow it a greater rest, you get a lot more out of the land, and you give back a lot more to the land. It's better. I mean, we think about migratory bison herds and those sorts of things, that high density, rapid movement. So, instead of, this is my farm and this is what I do here, and I only have a little bit of land and I only have a little bit of livestock. Maybe it's, let's get together and see if we can do something that allows us to share our resources a little bit. There are landowners, even though we think about land being short here, there are landowners that don't know what to do with the land and just want it to be kept open. So obviously we have to think about fencing. We have to think about ways to transport animals there and keeping them safe from predators and so forth when they're more remote. But that there do seem to be options, for those that want to get a little bit creative outside of the property ownership model.
What are some things that you suggest that a livestock farmer does not DIY and they should always have an expert be with them when they're doing it?
Well, from an animal welfare standpoint, I think that that animal health falls into that category. I think that any procedure, or anything really where the life or the well-being of the animal is at risk, that's important to make sure you've got qualified help. If we need to treat something, or we're concerned about body condition, or even if we're not and we just need a set of eyes, that's where experience goes the longest way.
Not something you can really easily Google.
Right. Or you can, and the answers that you get will lead you farther down
That's true.
The path of unrighteousness, which
That's true.
I run into frequently.
Oh no. What are some of the biggest costs that you think livestock farmers incur, and how do you think DIY can help with that?
Traditionally in livestock systems, feed costs are the most, especially in New England, where we've got this thing called winter and it's basically a 6-month growing season, which means that there's got to be some kind of harvested feed fed at some point if we're going to have animals all throughout the year. Now, I personally don't think that having animals throughout the year has to always be a given, and I think there's some alternatives to that we could think about. But if we get past that, those feed costs are going to be significant. What do we do about that? That's a complex economic question, because the more we venture into DIY for feed production, the more it starts to lead us down this path of equipment and just major investments which then require a certain scale to be able to operate economically and might not fit, a small scale livestock operation. For DIY, it's kind of one of those directions. It's either, you start to find ways to harvest more of your own feed or to stockpile feed on your farm so that you can extend your growing season. Or it's gravitating toward animals and systems that don't have the same needs for for harvested feed. Maybe it's just purchasing animals in the spring and finishing them in the grazing season and marketing them in the fall. Maybe it's a smaller, more primitive, more hardy, small ruminant, sheep or goats that just is able to harvest their own feed and do that more efficiently with less care.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit outside of the traditional definition of DIY, but part of the idea of domestication is that we want the animals to work for us, and that doesn't mean that we don't work for them too. But if that balance is, you're constantly building things or providing things, and the animals aren't giving back in return, then that's not a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to change the animal component to something that works better on your farm or in your system to match your resources.
Yeah.
The other big cost in terms of resources is labor. And that gets tricky because not everybody values their labor or puts a price on their labor or is concerned about how much time they're giving to this project. Many times, livestock systems are a lifestyle, and it's based on or exists because of a secondary income. That's totally fine. But to really evaluate it as a business, the labor costs are going to be right up there, if not greater than feed costs.
What about any advice you have for beginning farmers that are starting to think about adding livestock to their farm operation?
In addition to domestic livestock being a responsibility, we have to think about this as a system. And the most important question to answer any time that you do anything with livestock, and maybe anything you do in life, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but anything with livestock, you have to be able to say, why do you do what you do? Why do I have these animals? Why do I produce these products? Why am I interested in providing products to these people or these markets? And if you can answer the whys, a lot of the whats and the hows take care of themselves. In the class, the animal science class that I teach, I talk about the components of the system being animals, resources, products, and markets. And then I give an analogy of a chiropractor, where if you've been around livestock for an extended period of time, you've probably been to a chiropractor, but your head weighs like 12 pounds on average, and for every inch that your head is out of alignment, my posture is not very great right now, every inch that your head is out of alignment, it adds an additional 10 pounds to that weight. So if animals are the head of the system, and the animals are out of alignment with the resources that you have on your farm, the products that you're trying to produce, or the markets that you're trying to get them to, the whole system doesn't work. And in the same way, you think about what you're trying to market and who you're trying to do it for and why. Why do you want that lifestyle? And there's a lot of answers for that. There's no right or wrong, but the thought process is important.